As I explained, I've been fired. I've done the walk of shame. I've been walked out of the building before, and it's not fun. But life continued. And unfortunately, for some of us, we make those things more real than what we've accomplished in our lives. And we've accomplished a lot more than what people will actually ever see. Only we know that narrative. That's the narrative we need to subscribe to, not the ones that I'm going to talk about here. But the first one is to narrative and myth that you need to dispel is that it's hard to get a job when you've been fired. Now, in this day and age, mostly everybody has been fired or forced to quit or even laid off. All those things have been found to be shameful, especially let's say we've been unemployed for a long time. We think that that's hanging over our heads, but really, what it comes down to, it's a voice inside our head that doesn't exist anymore. What you thought was traditionally brought down to you as truth is just not true in this particular world. So I definitely would like you to move forward and get out of that type of thinking with that particular myth. The second myth is that I'm not good enough. And although it is normal to worry, it is not a necessary tool to use when you're trying to create the right narrative for your career and where you are now and where you need to go. It's very easy to get into your feelings and knowing that being fired and being rejected is a part of the game. And you can overcome that by uh, just rejecting that that's not going to be true about you. Third, you did your best. You think you got fired because your best effort wasn't good enough. And that's also a false narrative. Now, many times you could be in a job for several years and it was always the wrong job, except that then you had an agreement that they didn't want to go through the cost and the time in replacing you, and you didn't want to go through the cost and time of getting out and finding something else. So therefore, it's been kind of like a peace agreement, so to speak, but that only lasts for so long. So you need to reframe and start being more intentional about finding the right job because that is something that you should be doing and should be taking control of your career that way. Number four, the false narrative my family is not supportive is that a lot of times that our families are not supportive because we don't take the extra time to help them understand what our job entails, and sometimes you need to explain to them in detail. I know there's many times that even after my wife has been employed for a number of years, she still has to explain some of the nuances of the job, even though I've heard it so much even before we got married for the last few decades. But help your family understand why things happen the way they are. There's a right narrative. Now, you want to be truthful and integral, but at the same time, a lot of times being fired isn't particularly your fault. That was just the way that things had happened. Number five, the false narrative is that your boss will ruin you. And I understand there are times when there are bosses that will be vindictive and will want to seek revenge, but most of them will move on pretty quickly. And they also have an understanding that if you're their line and they're not being truthful, it will catch up to them. But ultimately, yeah, there are very few people who will go out of their way. And even at that, though, if you had the work, if you did the work and you could show how the work gets done, and you have an expertise in the area, people will hire you for the expertise despite of what other people will say. And of course, it's up to you to also get the people you need behind you that will support the good work that you've done, and that will be a non issue. Number six, my career is finished. One of the things that's really hard to understand, and it happens right after we get fired, we tend to understand a lie that's being told to us that we're finished just because we were fired. And perhaps back in the day, there was some truth to it, but people get fired and find a better fit for their skills and their job and the environment and their culture and the right culture for them every day. So you don't have to be a slave to that mentality that your career is finished. You want to redraw that narrative and get some reminders of your worth and what you've done is definitely have been worth it. Number 7, that you're alone. And in this particular time, in being isolated a lot, not having as many people to draw the positive energy that you're used to in person, um, the isolation can make being fired and the negativity behind it very real. And it's even worse when you didn't see it coming. And to a great degree, that should also be a hint that you got fired of one moment in time and not particularly uh, several moments of time, especially if people aren't being truthful. And there are a lot of scenarios regarding being fired, but I definitely don't want you to be a slave to the mentality. So that's it as far as this Prezi. There are 7 narratives that I talked about here, where you just need to reject them, forget them, create the right narratives for what's relative now for you, and you can move forward with your life and your career and find the right place for your skills. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My name is Mark Anthony Dyson, not that hard to find, especially on LinkedIn and many of the other social platforms. Thank you very much. If you want to read more about what I do as a career advice writer, and presenter, then you can go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com. Have a great day.